Hey everyone, welcome back for another video here on my YouTube channel. Today I have a Simon Hurley Create card using brand new products. And so what you're seeing here is the new background stamp called Lovely Lilies, and it is a pull apart which is gorgeous. I love that you have these two borders you could do on the sides of your cards, so pretty. And then we have this new stamp set called He Is Risen, and I'm in love with it. Oh my goodness. It's got some two-step stamping and so many beautiful sentiments in there. So we're going to make a couple of cards. We've got some Simon Hurley Create Stark White cardstock, and then the brand new ink called Sidewalk chalk. It is a very beautiful light pink. I'm going to pull down all of the pinks that are in the line that Simon Hurley Create has. And this way I can show you where this one kind of lines up. And look at that. You have this whole array of gorgeous pink colors into purple, and it just makes my heart go pitter-patter. So if you like his inks, run, don't walk to grab the new one. All right, I'm going to go ahead and score my background or my card panel. Not my card panel, my card base right at 4 1/4 inches because I want to stamp directly onto my card base. So I've scored it. I'm going to put this into my MISTI. I've pulled out the insides of my MISTI, and now I have some Heffy tape just kind of blocking off from the score line on the background or on the back because I don't want to stamp on the back. And then we're going to pull out our stamp and then line that up, but I'll show you that's how it kind of is a pull apart. And then it pieces right back together so beautifully. We'll put it in there, kind of place it around, and then we'll close the door of the MISTI. And then I'm going to use some magic powder bag over that because I do want to emboss on this. These are going to be Easter cards. I want them to be nice and subtle. So I've grabbed some juicy embossing ink. I'm going to ink up that whole background, stamp that down. And then we're going to cover this with some Brutus Monroe Alabaster embossing powder, which is just a beautiful fine detail white embossing powder. I'll set that off to the side because I do want to use that again. But we're just going to cover that, the whole thing. And I know white on white, sometimes it just doesn't, I mean, obviously showing in the camera doesn't do really great justice, but it ends up being so pretty. So I'll show you that's what we've got. And then we're going to heat set that till that is smooth and melted. I won't show you the whole process of the embossing because, or the heat process, because it took a little bit of time. But hold it up in the light, make sure that it's shiny. It goes from a matte finish to a shiny finish. And take a look at that. How pretty is that? All right, now that that's done, we'll go ahead and just reinforce that score line. And then it'll be ready for the front part. But before I move on to that, I do want to stamp the other background. I am going to go ahead and do the same process. We'll stick that back in our MISTI, but this time, after I've cleaned it off, I'm going to use the Sidewalk chalk ink. We'll just cover the whole stamp. And I'm sorry if you hear some jingling. That is my poor sweet senile dog walking around. She has no idea what's going on right now. So, yeah, I think she thinks she needs to be fed again, but that's not the case. All right, so let's take a look at those backgrounds side by side. Both very pretty, very subtle. I love the way that Sidewalk chalk looks on the Stark White cardstock. Now we're going to do our stamping. So I put the insides back into my MISTI, and then I'm going to ink this up using some Woof ink. The Woof ink is a very light gray, but I'm going to just step that up a notch, and I'm going to stamp it again. I love how Simon Hurley Creates inks will layer on top of each other, so if you don't like the intensity of your first stamp, do it again. And I wanted it to be gray because I did want it to be nice and subtle. I'm taking the second part of the stamp, and then I'm just going to line that up in there, close the door of the MISTI, and now I'm going to grab some GRRR ink. That's a nice pretty brown, and then I'll stamp that down. Lining it up was actually pretty easy, and then it has this beautiful wood grain look to it. I'm going to do a little more stamping at the very bottom edges, so it'll just deepen towards the bottom. Now I'm going to pull out Risen. We're going to stamp that one as well, but this one I'm going to stamp using some black. This is going to be the Ink on 3 Blackout ink. We'll stamp that down, and I'm going to stamp it again just to make sure that I have a nice crisp image. And then I'm going to grab out, originally I was thinking purple. I'm going to go ahead and line up my Risen word in there. And once that's all lined up, then I thought purple, because royalty, you know, this is perfect for Christ is Risen. But then I thought I'm going to grab triple berry first because I love to do ombre. So I've stamped that down. And then at the very bottom of the word Risen, I'm going to stamp Crown Me. I'll wipe off the top part, make sure that I don't have any like harsh lines, and then stamp that down. But take a look at that. How pretty are those colors on there? It's so beautiful. All right, now I'm going to show you how you can use your re-inkers and your ink pads to do a little bit of watercoloring. Now, the Stark White cardstock isn't exactly watercolor paper, but if you don't use a ton of water, you won't have any issues with pilling. I'm going to use a water brush, and you'll notice I put just a very small amount of the re-inker onto my glass mat. And even that was probably a little bit too much for all the watercoloring that I am going to do. All I'm going to do is just fill in all of the little like rosettes or the flowers with that Sidewalk chalk ink. And you can go back over the top of it and you can add some shadowing and shading where you might want that. And then I'm going to add a little bit of that color to the very bottom of my lilies and the inside, keeping it mostly white. But I wanted to stick with mostly the Sidewalk chalk. And then we'll do the rest of our lilies the same way. And I have this on double time watercoloring. I've got it, sped up twice. But when I move on to the word risen, I'm going to just go ahead and do this 4 times speed because it's all the same process, just putting some of that color down. And I just love how pretty all those colors work together. For the green, I'm going to show you that you can use your ink pads. I didn't put quite enough down. This is where it would probably be just a great idea to have your re-inkers, because you will end up using, you'll use your ink pad and then you'll be like, well, I need to re-ink the ink pad. So definitely consider getting those re-inkers. I have used these inks so many times, and I have actually had to re-ink a couple of my pads, but if you watch me at all, you notice that I use these ink pads like crazy. I mean, they're like my go-to ink pads nowadays. I am going to fussy cut out my cross. I know some of you are cringing, but I don't mind fussy cutting. And I'm just leaving a little white border around the entire edge of my cross. I won't fussy cut out the word risen. I am going to stick that into my guillotine trimmer. I'll trim off, just kind of lining that up with the clear piece that holds everything in place, and then just use the guillotine trimmer to trim that down. And I wanted to make sure that I'd have plenty on the left and right hand side so I could center up the word risen and then just trim off the excess. I do grab a few more sentiments from the stamp set, and I've got He Is. I at first thought I would stamp this out using the Woof ink, but then decided I just wasn't happy with that. It was a little too light, so I'm going to stamp that out using that Blackout ink. And then the word risen, this is where I decided I needed it in black. So I stamp it in black, and then I'm going to just trim those out using my guillotine trimmer when the time is right. I grabbed the scripture there's a couple of scripture sentiments in here, and I grabbed one of those. I'm going to ink those up and stamp that on that lower left hand side. And then I also grabbed out Have a Blessed Easter, so we're going to stamp that on the middle right hand side. So it's perfect. I'm just so happy with this. And now it'll be time to start adhering our pieces. So I'm going to use some liquid glue to adhere all of my pieces down. We're adhering our cross down to the one that has the white embossed background. I just loved how that looked on there, so subtle. And then we'll grab the words He Is Risen, and we'll glue those down as well. And then once those are down, that'll finish off that card. So we'll move on to the other one. And I'm just going to use some glue to adhere these down as well. You could use foam tape for this, but I wanted these to be easy mailers. And then I'll line that up on my glass mat, and then just try my best to center the word risen. And then I'll glue down He Is. And then I'll flip that over and trim off the excess on both of these sides. You could throw this in your guillotine trimmer and trim it down that way as well. But that's it. There are 2 fairly simple, beautiful cards using some of the brand new Simon Hurley Create stamps and also the new ink Sidewalk chalk, so gorgeous. I'll have all those linked down below so you can check that out. If you liked this video, please hit that like button and consider subscribing if you haven't already done so. And as always, I will see you very soon in another video. Bye everybody.